Welcome to another episode of M&A in the Trades, where we explore the dynamic worlds of mergers and acquisitions and field services. I'm your host, Yassin, joined by my co-host, as always, 𝗧𝗜𝗓𝗏. Gyner, how are you doing, my friend?
Good, Yassin. Thanks for having me again.
Well, hey, I'm excited about today's episode because we'll be diving into a critical yet often overlooked aspect of M&A, and that is integrating customer service. And our guest today is Rich Albanese, a seasoned veteran in the biomedical engineering field who has experienced the M&A process multiple times throughout his career. Rich has been through the complexities of integrating companies and knows firsthand the challenges that comes with it. So today, he'll be sharing his insights on how can you maintain a seamless customer experience during these transitions, the vital role of customer service and support activities like a customer center consolidation that can play. And we'll be addressing the importance of prioritizing these operations at the executive level. So stay tuned as we unpack these crucial topics and learn from Rich's extensive experience and Gyner as well. So Rich, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. So yeah, I'm Rich Albanese, and thanks to Yassin and Gyner for inviting me. I'm a career medical device executive and mostly in customer services. Spent the majority of my time in technical support, service engineering, field service operations. I've worked at large multinational companies and also startup companies. So thanks for asking me to join. I'm happy to be here.
Absolutely. When I was looking, on LinkedIn, I was, talking to Gyner about, who do we want to have as guests on the show and what is that profile? What came up really is we want folks who have experience, rolled up their sleeves, been through multiple M&A integration, work, at the executive level, can really add a lot of value from their experience. And I know you and Gyner sit on the Service Council. So your name was one of the first that came to my mind as someone I'm really excited about bringing here on the FXL show with Gyner to dive into a crucial topic and, how do you integrate customer service? So why don't we dive in, Rich? As we said, you've been involved in mergers and acquisitions, through, multiple cycles. What would you say is the single biggest challenge when it comes to integration?
Yeah, I think, from a field service perspective, I think the single biggest challenge is a continuity of customer experience for your existing customers. A lot of M&A teams, and I've been on both sides. I've been at companies that have been acquired, and I've been on in companies that have acquired others. I've been on acquisition teams as well. And one of the things that doesn't get discussed enough is what is the current customer experience, and there's a general lack of realization that the current customer base of the acquired company. And actually the acquiring company, their experience with the company and the brand is especially, after the sales cycle, is usually through the service experience. And so customers are used to a certain experience. And if you don't take into account, how to, maintain that experience, at least to a transitional period, and also how to communicate with your customers effectively on what you're doing, you could lose customers, and we saw that happen. I actually personally saw that happen at a previous company.
Okay. So that's interesting. So when you say customer experience, and I know, maybe customer experience is a really a very important focus, say, in retail, in banking, financial services, restaurants, but maybe you don't see that as much of a focus in field service for whatever reason. So, what's the scope of customer service? How do you define customer service? If you want to put it in tangible terms.
Yeah, sure. So my background is capital equipment. So I'm thinking about, service technicians performing maintenance, upgrades, and repairs. And let's just use a live example. So I was at a company that purchased a large multinational company. I just came on board, and they had just recently purchased two smaller companies called mid-sized companies. in the medical imaging world. And those two mid-sized companies had very, different service operations than the big company. And these were more personalized service where, customers could call their technicians directly for help. When they called into the contact centers functions at the two smaller companies, they always got right to a technical person to try to help them. There was typically a relationship there, so they would frequently know the person that they talked to,
very high touch.
Yeah, very high touch, very personalized. And so the big company comes in and purchases these two. And I think you had said previously that there's a tendency for big companies to think that our way is the best way. They came in and not very effective customer communication in terms of what that means. What does this mean? What does this mean to me as a customer, et cetera. But also immediately consolidated all of the customer contact to a central contact center from the two companies, and introduced an entitlement stage, and this allowed customers calling their field engineers directly. And so almost overnight, customers now had a less personalized experience. They had to call a contact center. They didn't know there was no relationship there.
They had to go through some hoops to get to the technician. Right.
They couldn't call their technician directly. The result of that was not only the expectation of the customers, but also a lot of the field technicians. And that was the spark that sparked the startup of a third-party company. So service employees went out and started their own company and went to the customers. Hey, this big company has, they don't care about you. We care about you. You still get to keep your service technician.
Started a revolt.
Yeah, and they grew, and they actually are from that point they grew into a major force in the market.
So Gyner, as typically you're the acquiring company, right? You've headed multiple companies as a executive, and you've made tens of acquisitions. How do you think about customer experience, and how do you make sure that you don't create a revolt inside your company, as Rich pointed out in one of his experiences?
I always say this to acquiring companies that I give advisement to. We're buying the company because it has some level of customer experience and revenue growth associated with it. You're buying the culture of that customer experience too. And sometimes what I'll call the accountant math, and this isn't me saying bad things about accountants, but the accountant math of a word called synergies of, back office. Like, hey, if I take out this $1 million expensive call center, I drive tremendous value back to the organization. What they lose sight of is, what does that cost you from a top line revenue perspective? And the real math is, hey, you got to do a risk assessment of if you lose revenue, does the revenue profit offset this synergy, thesis that you have built for yourself, right? So, if you're a 10% net profit business on a base of $1 million, so you're $100,000 in profit, and you're going to save $95,000 by shutting down this call center, but you're risking $1 million in revenue, you're really only saving $5,000, right? And it's like, well, is it really worth it then? Or is there a better solution that you need to look at? So there might be a hybrid that works, which is, hey, let me understand Richard's points, which are very good ones. Like, hey, if the customer values that connection point with the field technician, as an example, is there a way for me to make that a part of my organization or some parts of it? And is there a way for me to streamline the parts that are already there so that the output of the 1+1 equation here is better than we had in both our organizations? Right? And don't companies do the work? I think this whole ego of who is better in terms of the process gets in the way of figuring out what's the better process going forward. That's my view.
Yeah, exactly. And another key piece I was thinking about is engagement. So every acquisition, there's this discussion around merging cultures and change management of employees, but not a lot of discussion about change management with the customers. And a change management plan is typically heavy on communication. Very good change management plans address both kind of the left brain and the right brain. So the right brain, the left brain is the analytics. This is why we're doing it. This is the, all the numbers. The right brain touches the heart and people's emotional state. And if you really drive effective change, people need to bought in from an emotional level. I haven't seen a company very effectively do that with customers. In other words, customers should be on board with the change. They should understand the change, and they should be totally bought into it, and actually be cheerleaders of the change along the way. Instead of seeing it as, hey, my favorite little company just got took over by a giant conglomerate, and they don't care about me, and nobody's talking to me about it.
So that's interesting. So Richard, so then how do you think about this integration? You have two different customer experiences. One is high touch. I get to talk to the technician and work with them directly. The other one is, I have to go through a contact center. The contact center then dispatches the technician out. I'm trusting that guy or gal on the other side of the phone to understand my needs, understand what parts need to be on the truck, understand what kind of technician they need to send and what time to send them and what kind of skills they need to have and all of that. So very two different approaches to servicing clients. So first of all, if you're on the acquisition side, so let's maybe first put ourselves on the acquiring the platform. So how do you go about that assessment? As Gyner said, it's not, how do you go beyond the accounting synergy conversation and get to the heart of every business, and that is the customer and their experience?
Yeah, I don't know if there's a single answer to that. It's difficult. It's a difficult problem to address. I think the first thing you need to do is go talk to customers, both the acquiring company and the acquired company, and understand kind of what their experiences and what their needs are. You need to talk to your frontline people, sales and service. They're the folks that are out there every day talking to your customers, the ones that have the relationships. And just as an aside, this transition from, so a high touch personalized service is typically the hallmark of a smaller company because they can do that. They're not worried so much about scale. Large multinational companies, it becomes very difficult to do that, right? Your technicians are fully booked all day long. They may not be available on call. So that transition is a natural transition anyways from early stage small companies to large companies. Right. So as you grow.
Right.
So when you're acquiring, you're kind of almost accelerating that change. And so, you need to look at it carefully. You're probably going to have to wind up in this sort of contact center environment because that's how it's going to work at scale. But you need to bring those customers that are not used to that down that path in a way that bought into it. And in a way that, there's typically kind of a rush. So this other experience I said, there's this big rush. I had to send, relocate people to Atlanta for this big call center, and there was all big change. This franchising, employees and customers. So you have to be careful about the speed, and you have to understand what are the key touch points that customers love about their customers of the acquired company because they love that company. Right. And so what do they love about that company? What do they love about the service? How can we retain that as we scale to the larger, operation and have bring those customers along with us and make sure that they're on board, they're supportive, and, they see a future and they become just excited about now being part of the larger customer family as they were of the smaller customer family. I don't know if there's one single approach. I know that change is going to happen. That's kind of the what. The how you approach that change, I think, kind of depends on the specific circumstances of and environments in both companies. And by the way, in this situation, there's actually three companies that were being merged, and one of the companies had just bought another company, so it's actually kind of four companies in the mix here. And not only bringing all those customers along, which we didn't do very effectively, but getting the the support and field service organizations integrated as well. What was a challenge?
I think there's always this like human nature thing that's also going on. Like if I don't do this, I won't get to it. Like, and that's not true, right? I think it's all about how do you build timelines and hold people accountable to like deliver on it versus hey, I got to get it done now or it's never going to happen. Because I do think that sometimes as large organizations, we get kind of, you know, and I'll tell you, I fall into this sometimes and my team has to call me out on it, which I appreciate, which is the whole, if we don't do it now, it won't get done, right?
You had a 100-day plan, you know, you got to execute that post-acquisition plan.
Yeah, and look, that's a little bit of this whole culture that's evolved probably the last 20, 30 years in leadership and business in general. You just hit on it. Like, I have to have a 100-day plan. You don't. It takes 127 days and you do it right. That's better than it taking 100 days. Like, you know, I always say, like, do the bottoms up. What do you need? Like Richard said, talk to your customers, talk to your field representatives, talk to your sales team, understand the needs, right? And say, hey, based on that, we think it's going to take 147 days to kind of do this right. And look, as executives, it's our job always to push on that a little, to say, hey, you know, you built a bottoms up plan that's 147 days. I'm going to challenge the team to do it in 130. That's always my job a little bit, right? To kind of push those boundaries a little. But like doing it right should always supersede doing it, right? And I think that's the problem. There is a little bit of the, hey, if we do this, I become the hero of the project plan execution versus like what's right for the business. Yeah,
exactly. And I think to your point before, Gyner, there needs to also be a realization that, you know, not every process that, you know, in the acquiring company is maybe the right process. And there should be some benchmarking of the company you acquired. Maybe, you know, you bought them because they were valuable, and they're valuable because they know how to do certain things right, you know, product and process and service. So you need to learn from that.
Yeah. So the question, go ahead, Gyner.
No, the only thing I would add is I think the other miss is, and this is kind of on our side, and I, you know, as a former operations guy myself, where, you know, I sat in Rich's seat for a number of years, where someone would kind of hand me the ball and say, go figure out the integration of this. Like, there is a little bit I'm learning on the front side, which is in the acquisition process itself. We don't do a good enough job of really understanding what I'll call the secret sauce of the customer, which is like, hey, and some of that comes from the owner saying, I don't want you talking to my customers just yet. And some of that comes from us. But you really need a little bit of that. Hey, we need to have a small enough subset in the room to understand here, so we understand what we're buying, right? That's a miss too up front, right? There's an acquisition miss up front in assessing and understanding that.
Yeah, great point.
So then the question is, how do you harmonize this process? So like for you, Rich, what went wrong? And if you were to redo it again, what would you do differently? How would you do it differently? I mean, two very different models. So how do you harmonize that?
Yeah. So again, you know, kind of recognizing that, you know, the company that you acquired is doing some things that are good, that customers like. How do we adopt some of those practices? What is the right transition timeline? So obviously in this situation, we did it too quickly. You know, what is the change management plan? I've never seen a customer change management plan in these types of situations. So how do we, you know, and it's, you know, it's communication, it's you know, leveraging relationships, you know, et cetera, all the key components of a change management plan you would apply in the company for the employees, you should also do for customers. So, you know, what we would have done differently, I think, is slow down, you know, talk to our customers, keep those relationships in these two smaller contact centers. Don't immediately, you know, upend that and move everything to this big kind of impersonal contact center. And, you know, spend more time integrating the teams. Spend more time training the teams on the new products. So, you know, one of the issues with the new contact center is that, you know, none of the folks there, very few of them, really understood the products that we bought, right? So there was the effectiveness of the remote technical support really declined. So focus on training your folks, get all that stuff in place, training your folks, integrating the teams, customer change management, customer communication. And that communication, by the way, just to step back for a second, the communication to customers also includes what your timeline is, right? So instead of dropping them an email or a letter saying, as of Monday, you will now call this phone number, et cetera, call your field engineer. We didn't do it exactly like that, but effectively that's what customers felt. Communicate the change to timeline to the customers and in a way that tells them how they're going to see increased value, right? And now on the flip side, what we should have done as well is this sort of high touch, personalized, product-based support that customers were getting when they called in. They would get right to a technical person that could log into their equipment almost immediately and help them with their problem. That was a pretty good model. Maybe we should have had more. Could we scale that, right? Is there a way to scale that? Maybe we should go back and look at, the entitlements stuff. Maybe it was a little bit too complex and it was a bit too confusing for customers coming over. That didn't have to go through that because, we had a personal relationship with everybody and we had caller ID and we knew when they called and we knew who they were. So, are there components of the acquired companies that maybe we should have adopted that might have helped the customer base of the acquiring company, improve their experience?
That's very.
I do think you're buying. It's just remarkable to me because, I get mystified by this too, right? Sometimes. Yeah, as we acquire a company, you get all this energy as a team in the acquisition process itself that you don't just take a little bit of a breather post-close. And look, there are things that have to happen at close, like your bank accounts have to transfer and, sometimes your benefits and some of the legal issues, depending on the construct of the acquisition and deal have to happen. But, this rush to get everything else done, there is a part of me that's starting to learn, and I consider myself still learning about this, where it's hey, take a breather for maybe a month. Talk to the integration team and say what has to happen on day 1 through 30 post-close, and what is more optional, right? And then start to say, okay, let's really think about it. And customer service is one of those where I consider it optional, not from a negative standpoint. I think it just needs more time so that you can do the right assessments, you can understand people. And what people misunderstand too is there's a lot of culture that's embedded in the customer service experience with the people in the business, right? They feel very passionate about what they built and that kind of connectivity they have to their customer. And when you go rip it out, you're not only impacting the customer, you're causing really bad impacts on the culture of the business that you just bought. Unintentionally, you're not doing it on purpose, but it comes up, right? People start to leave, they start to wonder if their role's in jeopardy. All of that narrative starts to kind of unwind really quickly.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, and you're right, there's usually a timeline on the acquisition and a checklist, and that's all based on the business proposal that was brought to senior leadership. And usually, at least if you're a bigger company, you have, consultants running around, driving these acquisitions to a timeline because they committed that to senior leadership. When, to your point, Gyner, that initial business plan that was presented to senior leadership that they're going to hold you accountable to should have taken into account the change management and service. That's right. Perhaps with a longer time. But they usually don't. And so usually there's we have to deliver this on this date. We told the CEO and we're going to, so your acquisition project manager is driving to that date, irrespective of whether that's the right date or not. And so really needs to be a lot of upfront discussion, I think, as the acquisition roadmap or checklist or whatever the process is that's being used. And that needs to be built into the business case. So don't assume immediately you're going to convert all of your customers over to this new service process in an unrealistic time frame and deliver the results to the company and then build that into the business plan, because most likely you're going to miss. In my case, we lost contracts. Our renewals went down, our even warranty conversions went down because we saw the rise of this third-party service organization of ex-employees, which would, I doubt anybody in any acquisition meeting ever even thought of. So it really goes all the way back up to the initial business case that's presented to senior leadership in terms of what the acquisition team will deliver and when. And usually service is like the very last checklist, right? Integrate service, boom, yes, no, right? It's at the bottom. It's usually not at the forefront of anybody's thinking, but it needs to be higher up the list, because to Gyner's point, you're purchasing a customer base as well, and you would like to retain that customer base, and you need to understand what that customer base values, and you need to make sure you retain it.
So Gyner, so when you're doing an acquisition, how, I'm putting you on the spot here, how do you take all of this into account? Do you take into account the customer experience, the customer service, as part of your due diligence, before you close, when, you're getting all the documentation, you're getting all the financials? Is that like, when is the best part? So if you've got a partner like Rich leading your, service arm, when do you bring Rich in, or when should you bring Rich in? And you've got an accelerated timeline. You've got your corporate dev people. They don't want you talking to the owners, and there's so many. You're juggling so many balls. Lawyers, bankers. So how do you make sure we don't screw this up? So if we're about to make an acquisition, how do we go about this the right way?
I'm going to say this a little differently. If it impacts Rich's area post-close, then I need to bring Rich in. And I always say that to the integration teams more broadly now, right? Which is, hey guys, like, if this is going to be a change to customer service and you're proposing it in the ether to me, and the guy who's going to be accountable for that going forward is not on this call, then either A, we bring him in, or B, we agree to say we're not going to do anything with it until he can join. That's the end. It can't be part of your integration synergy thesis, right? If the people, team, person who's accountable for it can't be a part of it right now. It just can't, right? Because essentially you're making an assumption without having the expertise in that area, right?
Right.
So then I go with the easy assumptions, right? So maybe there's purchasing savings, there's savings on benefits, things that have real math to. And I say, hey, if we're not going to bring in Richard on this, then customer service is off limits until we can.
Yeah. Interesting. And that's happening when you're creating that value creation plan or that thesis for the acquisition before or during due diligence. When is that happening?
So it depends on the process, right? It really depends on when the conversation comes up. It could come up early on in the deal making process. It could come up during diligence or any time in between, right? For me, it's whenever it does come up, what you need to hold firm with the team is, if the experts that can confirm that in fact you can drive this level of aggregation or integration post close can be on this call and confirm to me, then I will sign up for it. Makes Otherwise, sense. I'm not signing up for it. Right?
All right. Rich, you're on the team. Gyner, twisted my arm. You're on the team. You're on the integration team. What do you need from us? So you're in. So what's your step as now a service leader? You're on the integration team. Customer service, we recognize there has to be two different models. One touch, our model is a contact center, low touch. And then the company, the acquisition, they have a high touch model. What do you want to do? Where do we start with this?
Yeah, so the first start is obviously discovery, right? So hopefully some of that came out of due diligence, probably not a lot of the soft touch stuff, the experience stuff, but you need to go through a discovery process. You need to find your counterpart or the appropriate contact person at the company you're acquiring. Usually things aren't announced yet at that time, so you have to be a little bit careful. about who you talk to. You need to again, you need to discover what processes they have in place. Discreetly, if required, understand customers, maybe talk to some key customers under NDA if possible. But really understand, soup to nuts, what is their service process? What infrastructure do they have in place? What's their tech stack? What's their, service requisition process? What's their parts process? Understanding all of that. That could take a little bit of time, but you need to, have a checklist of what you're going to assess. And then you need to sit down with some key people, hopefully from the acquiring company as well, because they need to have a say. So I think, if I was brought in, then I would be establishing my own kind of sub team attached to the core team of the integration on services, with the right subject matter experts and opinion leaders, and then start to formulate that transition plan with the ultimate goal of increasing where possible customer value, building the brand or saving the brand, or because you're now merging two different brands together, right? So you don't want to just immediately destroy the old brand, because that's what customers purchased. But how do I transition that brand, especially the service brand, from the old state to the new state? The old state being separate companies, the new state being one family of companies, one single company. So that's kind of where I would start, and make sure that it's understood in the acquisition team that you're doing an assessment to ensure you're retaining the customer base and keeping the customer base satisfaction at a level that continues to support what the company is doing, and ultimately ends up in customer retention.
Sounds like a lot of work. Gyner, does that concern you at all? Does that concern you at all? Like it's slowing down the deal, or your corp dev people? Yeah.
No, I don't think it slows down. Well, yes, it slows down the deals, I guess, in terms of black and white absolutes. The truth is, though, this is where, as a leader like myself or others, has to make a decision on how much are you banking on customer service synergies being a part of the arithmetic that makes the deal work or not work, right? Because what I will say is, every single time you bank on customer service synergies, you have to bank on customer attrition. And if you're not, then you're
retention.
Yeah, because look, you make this sense that I'm going to do some roll up, whatever the right answer for you is. Like, I'm not going to judge the right answers, but inevitably you're going to lose some customers as an output of that. You don't want to. And what Richard described is more about, like, what is the best version of this to lose the least amount of customers, right? And I think most senior executives go into this with, we're never going to lose a single one. And that is a fairy tale. It just is a fairy tale, right? So stop fooling yourself. And if you don't want to lose a single one, then what I would say is, don't put that as your acquisition thesis at all. And then you go to somebody like Richard or the integration or operations team post-close and say, hey, help me understand how this business operates. And is there a path for us to integrate it in a manner that, we mitigate or maybe eliminate any customer attrition? Let's do it afterwards and not even build it into the arithmetic.
Exactly. And, I think the key fundamental point is the customer service aspect of any acquisition is much bigger than most acquisition teams believe or know. Like I said, usually and I've been on a couple acquisition teams from acquiring companies. Usually it's one checklist on the on the overall checklist of the acquisition. And so I think the key is for us is to move that upstream and make it, the importance of it, higher in the overall acquisition project.
Yeah.
And so, are you just focused on retention, or is there also a revenue play there? Like, are you looking at lifetime value? Are you partnering up with your revenue leader? Are you going all alone into this? Who are you bringing on to kind of beef up the case? It's like, okay, this is not just picking up a matter of picking up the phone and answering the customer, but there's a revenue attribution to how well you do this integration. Like, this drives growth. So how do you make that case? How do you build up like a revenue case around it too? Because leaders either really hear cost or revenue. If I don't hear those two, I'm not listening.
No, it's a good point. It needs to be underpinned with the business model. And so I would be bringing in the appropriate financial analyst, but you need to have a business model that takes into account some level of attrition, right? And as Gyner said, nobody wants to hear about that, but you should have a model of customer retention, service contract renewals, warranty conversions, et cetera. You should model that on the new combined install base. And not only for cost savings, because you're going to find some cost savings when you do that, but also for top line. And you should have a corridor, right? So risk assessment around possible customer attrition, and understand kind of what your obviously your best case is 0. That'll never happen. But what could be your worst case? Try to model that a little bit so that, and also, by the way, what might the price be of your new contracts in the new company? Chances are if the products are similar to the companies that got acquired, the contract pricing is probably very similar. So that might not be a big issue, but it might be. So you need to look at that as well. You need to understand, what the long-term service revenue model would look like and what the long-term service P&L would look like after you deliver those operational cost savings. But the business model needs to be realistic. So I've seen a lot of business models in my life. I've never seen a bad business model, even though they don't always turn out bad. They don't always turn out good. But it needs to be realistic in terms of what you can do and what the time frame is.
Yeah. What I would say is, like, there's like these P's, we've talked about them all on this call, right? There's if you're really thinking about customer service and thinking about attrition and what does it look like, it's like the way you do the arithmetic is you got to assess the people that you have. Is there risk to the people that you have in the customer service? Is there risk to the pricing? So maybe your pricing between the two organizations, there's a different pricing model that your customers have to ascribe to the new model, right? Or you have to ascribe to the fact that you're going to have two models going forward. There's a process piece, right? Which is, are your customers going to ascribe to a newer process or some new hybrid process, right? And then there's a product piece that Richard just hit on, right? Is your product what does your product look like, or is the product going to, like, the narrative or the value proposition around the product itself? And when I say product, it's service too, by the way. Service is product, right?
Productized service.
Yeah, when you productize service, you got to look at all those and say, in each one of those buckets, you're going to lose a customer for one, all, or some of those reasons, right? And in some cases, you'll be fine with it. You'll say, hey, look, there's a high operational cost of this customer. When we do the math of it, it was good for the owner because it was revenue for him. But for us, doing a no profit piece of business is not worth it, right? So then in that case, you're like, hey, customer attrition isn't necessarily a bad thing. We take out operational complexity, right? And the revenue goes down, but we don't really lose anything out of it, right? So you really have to understand it and spend some time. And I think Richard's pointing out, like, the level of detail you have to get after, you have to be committed to that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, this is phenomenal.
It's no small piece of work.
Yeah. No, it is. So then, Rich, my final question to you is, if I am a CEO, like I'm in Gyner's shoes, right? If I'm a CEO and I'm looking to merge customer service organizations during an integration, what question should I be asking myself that I'm probably not asking? Or what is that question that should be on my mind that I'm not asking myself right now, or my team?
That's a good question. I would say, why do customers, so let's say the acquired company is company A. So why did customers buy company A? And why did they buy service from company A?
And value. What's the value? How does the customer define value?
What is it? Right, exactly. So how did the customer define the value for company A? And how do I build on that and retain it?
How do I not lose that proposition?
Yeah. I think everything flows from that, I think.
I love it. So before we wrap up, I know, Rich, you've got a biomedical engineering background, and during one of our conversations, you mentioned that you built a LinkedIn group for outgoing biomedical engineers so they can transfer knowledge to the younger generation of engineers. Could you talk us through that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So it's still young. So the group itself is still young. We have about 265 members. But the idea is that, and I think everybody knows, we have kind of a generational problem where we have a number of very experienced veteran support and field technicians retiring, taking with them a lot of the knowledge in their heads. We have a newer generation of technicians coming up with different skill sets, not good or bad, just different skill sets.
Right.
And at the same time, there's a shortage of those technicians. So, time to value becomes very important, meaning first of all, it's hard to find a technician. Then once you get them, how quickly can I get them up to speed? And so the idea behind the group is to build a community where these veterans, even after they retire, can help support the new generation of field technicians that come in. It's very specific to the product. So I'm right now focusing on the biomedical area. And even within there, I'll have imaging and surgical, et cetera. But the idea is to allow those veterans to continue to contribute and support and provide, technical support and knowledge to the incoming new generation of field technicians.
I love it. So there you have it, folks. If you're passionate about this, if you're into biomedical, this biomedical sector, if you're a biomedical engineer, whether you're starting out or you're a veteran, make sure to connect with Rich on LinkedIn. Rich, thank you so much for coming on the show. It was really wonderful listening to your insights. And Gyner, as always, you always bring a very important perspective, the C-suite perspective to all of these M&A challenges and opportunities as well, and how to think about your next acquisition and make it a successful. So, Richard, thank you for your time. If you've enjoyed this episode or have any questions, feel free to reach out or comment below. And until the next episode, this is Yassin and Gyner from the FXL M&A in the Trades. Thank you so much, and I'll see you on the next one.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.